I'll go ahead and call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of June 8th, 2021 of the City of Bristol, Virginia City Council. At this moment, please join me in a moment of silent prayer. Please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Appreciate everyone who came out tonight. Sitting down first. Also thank the school board for allowing us to use their facility while the elections are going on in City Hall. One item under the mayor's minute, just let everybody know that earlier today I received a letter from Councilman Munpower, and I'll just go ahead and read that in its entirety. It says, "Gentlemen, it is with regret that I must submit my resignation to the city and citizens of Bristol, Virginia for the council seat that I was re-elected into on July 1, 2020. As you know, I've accepted an employment position with Firm Lift Incorporated as Chief Operating Officer in Livonia, Michigan last summer. Since that time, I have traveled back and forth from Michigan to Bristol to attend required council meetings. I was given additional responsibility within Firm Lift late last week, and now my future travel and work schedule commitments will simply not allow me to continue as a member of City Council. I have enjoyed my time on council and hope and pray that the hard work improving the city's finances will continue. I wish the council, citizens, city employees, and all associated with the city the best of luck for a very prosperous future. Sincerely, Kevin Munpower." I appreciate Councilman Munpower's service and his commitment to our city's finances over the years, and I think I have a little more to say after we've had a chance to talk under item 3 about the procedures we'll follow for that seat. Speaking of vacancies, I'd also like to remind you there are vacancies for various boards and commissions starting July 1. If anyone is a resident of Bristol and interested in those, they can go to the city's webpage and put in the application form and list the things, and they can turn it back into the city manager's office, and we will consider those appointments after July 1. Anybody have anything else? Okay. City manager?
I would just like to say to Kevin Munpower, he supported me when I was appointed city attorney and also city manager. I'm forever grateful for his support for those two positions and the support he's given me over the past 4 years. Mr. Munpower has helped the city guide itself through one of the most significant financially distressed situations in the city has ever experienced, and hopefully we'll never have to experience something like that again. So with his support for me and the things we get to do here in the city over the past 4 years is greatly appreciated. I'll miss having him as a member of council.
Item number C, matters to be presented by members of the non-agenda items. No one has signed up? No one has signed up, but if anyone does want to speak, move to item D, adoption of the agenda.
I move for the adoption of the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Clerk, call roll.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnham,
Yes.
Hartley,
Yes. Alright, item number 1, presentation of annual report incorporated by Robert Goldsmith. Mr. Goldsmith?
Thank you, Mayor Hartley, members of council. Ms. Reeves, appreciate the time on your agenda this evening to present Incorporated's most recent annual report. You have a copy at each of your stations. This is almost a year old and is for the period that ended June 30th, 2020. So the numbers are a little dated. I've got a few updates I can give you this evening, but it was a busy year for us. We had the largest budget that we've ever had, about $25 million that year. Had an economic impact overall of about $108 million, almost $1.4 million here in Bristol. We served more people than we've ever served before, and instituted a number of systems for accountability in-house that I think will help us going forward. During that year, we served 740 individuals here in Bristol, Virginia, provided a range of services. We made business loans to small businesses. We had 5 microenterprise loans. We provided consumer loans to individuals. And 14 of those. We own and provide affordable rental housing. We have a few units here. We have 16 units that we provide affordable rental housing to families here in Bristol. We provide free supportive housing to homeless people. We, during the year, provided motel rooms for homeless people, particularly during the latter part of that year, starting in March. Became an issue. During that year, we provided short-term housing to 10 households in the course of the year. We work with 33 families with young children, helping children grow and develop in a more positive way and get all of their necessary medical and dental care, medical and dental care. And we work with people who have been in the same system and released back to Bristol to help them find housing, find jobs, things like that. And then we also work with adults, with youth, and with people who have been laid off from jobs and getting trained or retrained and placed into so during the course of that year, those are the highlights of the services that we provided. More recently, we, like everyone, dealing with the pandemic. Last year, almost a year and a half, it seems like. We closed our offices during middle of March of 2020. Closed our Exart Center and just have reopened in May. During May, we established protocols for cleaning our buildings and for the safety of our staff. During the course of the year, we don't usually do a lot in terms of emergency assistance, but because of the several specialized ones where the SBA may partner with the repayments for the borrowers. We provided rent mortgage assistance to 116 households in Bristol who suffered because of the pandemic. And we're currently providing assistance to people to be able to get access and afford internet service. So that's pretty much it from us. We're been a busy year, but I think despite the difficulties of the pandemic, we've made some progress. I'm able to help some people. Be happy to answer any questions that anybody
Anyone, any questions for Mr. Goldsmith?
I have no questions, but thank you for coming tonight, Mr. Goldsmith. And as you know, I served on the People Incorporated board for a short time, and I think people sometimes don't even realize how involved you all are in the community and how many people you help all around, and including right here in Bristol. So we thank you for everything you all do.
I'll echo that and say I really appreciate it. I know you've done, I had to, like a lot of folks, had to shift gears, but they've done a lot to help people in the pandemic, various ways, and I appreciate that. You People Incorporated United Way, a lot of agencies have stepped up and really tried to help people through this, so thank you for doing that. And also, I think probably congratulations are in order. I understand you're getting ready to retire soon.
Yes, sir. End of the year. As a matter of fact, our board will be announcing our successor in the year.
I appreciate all your many years of service to our community and this whole region.
Thank you, Mr.
Item number 2, presentation from the Bristol Public Library. Ms. Casey.
So I know how it works now. Good evening. I thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you tonight. It's good to see you, council members, Mayor Hartley, staff, and the public. I like this statement here, serving the citizens of 2 states since 1929. We are pushing 100 years. So, who am I? For those of you that have not been introduced to me before, or those of you that wish you could forget being introduced to me, I am Tanya Kessner, and I am the Executive Director of the Bristol Public Library, and it is a role that I'm very proud to serve in and to serve the community in this particular position. I'm also proud of the library staff that I work with, who help me and enable me to do my job well, because they are fantastic support and they work well. They're team players, so they help me do my job. Okay, I just wanted to give you an update tonight, mostly about where we've been and where we're headed in the future. I know we've all been in a bad place. COVID-19, the pandemic, this past year was rough for everybody, but I feel like the library we were able to offer a lot of people a lot of resources that they saw as essential. So I'm proud of the work that we were able to do. We did close March 18th. On May the 5th, we started curbside service. We were the first library in the region to do that. And we did it because people needed us. People wanted their resources. So we not only circulated books and DVDs, but we ran out with people wanted stuff printed off and they couldn't get it any other place. We do that for them too through curbside. I think it's important that to note that a couple months later, we opened it back up, and then we were open for 5 months during the pandemic. And we're proud of been able to say that too. Both of our facilities were open. And we only did it because we felt we could do it safely and offer the things that we could do safely enough. Fortunately, we didn't have any situations that we had to close for because any of our staff got sick or anything, which could have happened. We tried to be as safe as possible. We of course followed the cities and the CDC and the Virginia Department of Health, and that's how we managed to do what we were able to do. We closed again December 2020 because, as you recall, I know the numbers in our area were so bad, particularly right in our area, so we didn't want to, but we closed the facilities again, and then we continued to offer curbside service. One thing that we were able to do with the help of Borough Construction and the Library Foundation Board was, during the pandemic, was complete the family bathroom. So that's something that we were able to do while we were closed. We offered a fine amnesty during National Library Week. We opened March the 15th after we shut down again. We offered that amnesty for the entire month, which also went through National Library Week. So it was a great time to do that. And we wanted to give back to the community a little bit as well because they had just gone through a financial hardship. Everybody was struggling. But in doing so, we actually received over $2,500 in resources because we found that once you remove those 20-cent fines or 50-cent fines that people don't want to deal with, they will bring their stuff back that we paid money for. And we renewed 169 cards. So that's where we were, and this is where we are. I'm thankful to the city and Mr. Eads for getting us on that list because the staff did have the opportunity to be vaccinated, which was awesome, pretty early on. And then another way in which the library was able to give back, another good example of us giving back to the community was that we became a vaccination site. So in May, for 4 weeks, each week on Thursday for 3 hours, we opened up our meeting space for people to get vaccinated. And we had 239 people that were vaccinated as a result of that. I most really thought it was important, again, to mention that we were the first in the region to offer curbside service, but due to its popularity, we're keeping it. I'd say a lot of businesses and different places are probably doing that too because it's just more convenient for some people if they have a car full of kids or maybe they have a physical handicap. In some ways, going through the curbside, through the drive-through is more convenient for them. If it's what the community wants, that's what we're going to give them. So that's now a permanent service. You should have had a handout too that had some of this information on it, which was some of our statistics and circulation. We were closed entirely for a month, but as you can see, the drop in circulation of our materials was not really bad at all because even part of that time when our facilities were closed, we only had curbside for like 3 months, and those items we still circulated quite a bit. So I'm happy about that. So where we're going, hopefully we are going to start to fine free July the 1st, which we'll continue to see more of our resources back. We're always good stewards of public funds, but this has COVID-19 and doing the fine amnesty has shown us that when people don't have those fines or those barriers to coming in, they'll bring their stuff back, which costs more than that 50 cents we may or may not get. So this also, it's more welcoming to our users because we don't have to be the fine police, and it supports the library's mission of equitable service. Again, this doesn't mean it's just a free-for-all. We're not about, if they damage the book or if they don't bring it back, books still have due dates. There was an awesome article in the Bristol Herald Courier about this initiative, so I hope you were able to see that, but they will be responsible for their materials. So this is something we're excited to do. We're not the first to do it. Lots of libraries around us have started it, but we don't want to be the last. and we're hoping that our community will appreciate it. I just want to mention the Jones Creativity Center because I don't know if people, I think sometimes libraries are synonymous with books, and that's great because that's what we're about, but we also do so much more. And the Jones Creativity Center is a fine example of this. During the pandemic and always, we offer, they provide assistance by offering computer classes, resume help, and as you read it to you, but job search help. And I think this is pretty awesome. 53 people actually called in to report that they were hired because of the assistance that they received from the Jones Creativity Center. 95 people gained new computer skills. This is important stuff to me anyway. Okay, here's where we want to be too. Return to normalcy. I think it's where everybody wants to be. And also it's where I want to thank you for your support and showing that you care about our region and promoting education, literacy, and digital access for all. And, we're here for you too. If you ever need us, we'll, just like we were able to provide that vaccination site, this is what we do. We're here for the community and we're here for the city, and we appreciate the support you give us. And I'm proud and honored to serve in this role that I do because I am passionate about what libraries do for their community. Also, this book here, Absolutely Normal Chaos, is literally at our library if you ever want to check it out, because that is pretty much how I feel about normal. So thank you for listening to me talk and give this update about the library. I hope that myself or another library staff member will come and just, ever so often, not too much where it gets on your nerves, but comes and talks to you about what we're doing and sends you updates about what the library is doing for the community. So does anybody have any questions for me on anything? I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments for discussion?
I would like to say thank you first for coming tonight and giving us a presentation. And, I just want to commend you all for what you did during the pandemic. I have a few friends that work in libraries in other localities, and they were way behind where you all were. And it is a good service under normal circumstances to be able to have such a big and good public library that we have. But especially, over the year of COVID, people staying home, it's good to have access, to books that you don't have to buy necessarily if you want to read something. You have the whole world at your fingertips, And a library is one of the most powerful tools in the world, for people because it's knowledge. So thank you for what you all do, and I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate all that you're going to continue to do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Again, I do appreciate you continuing the service during this last year. I know myself, me and my family took advantage of the curbside, learned a lot about your online services that I kind of knew existed, but had never really delved into until I had a reason to. Sitting at home for a few months, there's only so much Netflix you can go through before you want to read a good book. So I appreciate that. And as you mentioned, coming back, you're more than welcome, and we look forward to updates as to how you're serving our community.
Thank you so much. Again, I appreciate your support, and I don't know if I give Mr. McCullough a shout out, but he comes to our facilities meetings to help us with their building and help me figure out what's going on with it. I really appreciate him for doing that. And I also appreciate the Library Board of Trustees because I have some support here tonight, Cobra and Stephen, so thank you so much. And we'll keep on keeping on. You need anything, let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you for loving the library.
All right, item number 3. Pursuant to Section 2.2-3711.A1 Code of Virginia 1950 is amended, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body and personnel. Do I have a motion to enter into executive session?
I move that we enter into executive session for the reasons stated.
Second.
Clerk, call the roll.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard. No. Farnham,
Yes.
Hartley,
Yes. first off, let the record show that Councilman Wingard did not enter into the executive session. And then by roll call vote, council members certify that only business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements as specified in the motion to convene an executive session were discussed. Clerk, please call the roll.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard, abstain. Farnham,
Yes.
Hartley,
Yes. At this time, entertain a motion to approve the city manager's request to hire Mac Chapman as an economic development specialist.
Move to accept the request.
Second.
Clerk, call roll.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard, yes. Farnham,
Yes.
Hartley,
Yes. And at this time, I'll accept a motion to accept Councilman Mumpower's resignation.
Move to accept Councilman Mumpower's resignation.
Second.
Clerk, call roll.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard, yes. Farnham,
Yes.
Hartley,
Yes. All right, at this time, let people know how the appointment process to fill that vacancy will work. Much as it has for the past two vacancies, Vice Mayor Steele and Councilman Fleener both resigned. The city will we will post applications on the city website no later than 5 p.m. tomorrow. These applications are due by 4:30 p.m. on Friday, June the 25th. The applicants will be invited to a call meeting on June 29th at 6 p.m. for public interviews. And we'll interview all the applicants, and I believe that the past precedent, we will do those in the order they were received. After that, council will discuss potential applicants in a closed session on July 1 after the 9 a.m. reorganization meeting. Applicants will be selected for a closed interview, and they do not need to attend that meeting. The invited applicants will be interviewed in a closed session on July 6th at 6 p.m. An applicant will be appointed on the evening of July 6th, and that newly appointed council member will then report to the circuit court clerk's office to take the oath of office no later than 4 p.m. on July 7th, which will be within the time frame to fill the vacancy. We'll move to item number 4, landfill update by Ernie Hoch of Draper, Aden Associates.
Thank you, Mayor Hartley, council members. Tonight I would like to just give you an update on really the progress that we've made and really the challenges that we have ahead for the landfill. Again, just to recap, certainly these issues have really started at the beginning of the year with a lot of voter complaints that citizens and residents in both Virginia and Tennessee had experienced. Upon investigation, work has been done and was completed last Friday on the initial work that you all approved back several months ago that SCS had done. That work was to upgrade some wells, essentially connect some of the gas systems a little bit better, and to remove some of the leachate and condensate out of the line so that liquid didn't block the gas flow. That work has been done. In addition, some additional work was added on. There are some cleanouts at either end of the landfill, in the north and south end. The south end had been connected for some time and gas was being drawn from those. The north end now has also been connected and there is gas being drawn from those. Part of this process really, as I've mentioned before, it's really a multi-phase and it's somewhat of a forensic investigation at the same time. So the goal is obviously to stop the odors coming from the landfill. Landfills by design create odors, create gas, create methane. That's what they're supposed to do. But also what's supposed to happen is that that gas is collected on a landfill as large as yours through an active gas system. The gas is pulled up in the wells draw a vacuum, the vacuum goes to either a flare or a generation station that you have within Genco. So that gas, called methane, it also has a lot of volatile organics in it, which is really what you smell. The methane, as you know, is colorless and odorless. But one of the first goals with this is to break that methane down. Methane is a very dangerous greenhouse gas, and by burning it, we actually break it down and make it less damaging to the environment. So that's being done. But what we want to do is pull more of the gas. So if 100% of the gas is what we'd like to pull, the closer we can get to that, it's never perfect in any landfill, but the closer we can get to that, the more fugitive gas won't escape and won't cause odors. There's been a lot that's been escaping. Numbers reflect that the landfill should be producing a lot more gas than it really has and has in some time, maybe historically. It's a challenging landfill because it's a quarry landfill, as we've all spoken about. The goal is to increase that. So how do we increase that? Firstly, we have to put cover over it. The cover is the cover. So the daily cover on the landfill has to be thick enough and evenly spread to make sure that none of the gas is actually seeping out of the surface of it. Small pieces, almost indetectable oftentimes. But we want to make sure the landfill is covered. And the city has gone a long way since I've been involved in the past few months. There has been more cover than there had been, but we still have a long way to go. And it's an ongoing process. So we want to encapsulate it as best we can. The gas wells also, we discovered that many of them still aren't working properly. We have 19 gas wells out there. Anywhere between 5 and 7 of them at various times are not producing enough gas. They're not. They're either flooded, they're cracked, they're broken. There's a number of reasons why gas wells over time go bad, but these gas wells have been in there since roughly 2016. It's not unusual that on a regular basis new wells are put in some cycle. Next big step or big project is to get more gas wells into this landfill, to replace the ones that aren't working, and then also to add additional ones in areas where there aren't enough coverage. And you've heard talk about this chimney area. Well, it's really a vent. It's really an area where we've got some gases coming up the sidewall. We've identified those and we're watching those, and we want to get more wells in that vicinity to pull any odors from that area and to deal with that situation. Then we can essentially try to push the soil to those edges and cap some of those sidewalls better where there are vents, and pull more gas. Again, we pull more gas, less goes up into the atmosphere. At the same time, we're working, as you've heard, with the wastewater issues. There are wastewater issues that we're working with. They're not necessarily directly connected to odor, but they may be. And how much they're connected to the odor is still to be determined, but there is a high level of benzene in the groundwater or gradient that's at the bottom of this landfill. That's being pumped up and sent down to the sewer system for treatment. The treatment plant is okay with it, but the sewer system, there's too much benzene in it, so it has to be removed, and we're talking with BVU about how to do that, how to mitigate that. It's not an easy project, and in order to do that, we have to work on wet well. A wet well is a shaft that goes 300 feet down into solid rock that all this liquid drains in from leachate, gradient, and witness zone. This liquid drains in and then is pumped out and goes into the sewer system. There's a number of mechanisms in there and some telemetry and flow meters, level gauges and so on that aren't working properly that need to be replaced, in addition to a motor. We've been working on a almost daily basis with DEQ. We have weekly calls with DEQ, with the city, with our firm, SCS at times, a number of members of DEQ, to keep them abreast of all the things that we're doing. There's a number of different things. We're testing air, we're looking at leachate, we're looking at gradient, we're looking at cover, we're looking at ways to treat the benzene, we're looking at ways to capture more gas. So there's multiple things going on at the same time. Really, the whole goal is to get this landfill to operate to maximum efficiency. And that is by collecting as much gas as we can, burning it off so there isn't the odor, and that it The EPA, as you may have heard, is in town. We've been in touch with Mr. Eads. They've actually had a quick email with him this evening, and we'll probably connect with him tomorrow. So what is he doing? So many residents are saying that the odors are bad, and in certain areas they certainly are bad. When I look at the data between what comes in from the city and what this Smell My City app is, and Facebook, in June, the past couple of weeks, we're about 85% of the complaints are in Tennessee, about a mile southwest of the landfill. That's a real concentrated area. So why is that happening? I can't give you a definitive answer, but the short answer is it's a combination of the landfill. The landfill builds up pressure and almost burns. It lets off the gas. It'll build it up, and then it will release more gas. Sometimes the barometer will have an effect on that, air pressure. Sometimes winds will then take that air or bad smelling air in different directions. Because it's a quarry, it's a bowl. And it's a bowl with straight sides. So when the gases collect, they go out I was in the landfill most of the day at different times. And on the surface of the landfill, I don't get any odors. In fact, the odors are pretty mild today in the landfill. They generally are though. But what I think they're doing is they're coming up the sidewalls and then going up into the atmosphere, going up high, and it's heavier, and then it's eventually dropping, falling into valleys, and depending on the wind, it's carrying it into certain neighborhoods, probably more than others. That could change. A week from now, a month from now, you might get complaints in a totally different section, maybe into Virginia side. There's no way to control that. So the way to control it and fix it is to pull as much gas as we can, as quickly as we can, get as much cover material as we can on this landfill. And then at the same time, we're working with DQE with any deficiencies that they mention. There's been a couple of notices of violations and some warning letters that you're aware of. We've addressed all of those. It's in the process of review and talking with them. There's an order management plan that we're working on with them, which is part of the complaints and how we address these issues, and that we're actively taking steps to get this to be resolved. The EPA, as I mentioned, coming in, their goal is to really sample the air at a different level. We sample the air and see. With the tests that we've done thus far, we haven't seen any levels that would create a health issue past close proximity maybe to the chimney. But once you get 10 feet away, it's dissipated enough. The EPA is going to look at some of these areas where there's been very heavy odors to do a sample there, 24 hours sample or a continuous sample, and check those concentrations of particles that are in that air and see if any of those rise to the level. If they do, and there is a health issue with that, they'll be able to identify that and let citizens know and be able to take the appropriate measures to mitigate that. Again, we'll see where that goes. Typically, that's not the case. Typically, we can smell, humans, things that are such minute particles, like a part per billion. Most of the things we're talking about are parts per billion. So a part per billion, just as a matter of how do you visualize that? If I took an eyedropper and dropped one drop of water or dye in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, that's 1 part per billion. So it's very small. Even if you have hundreds of parts per billion, it's very, very small. When it goes up into the air and then drifts for a mile into somebody's area where they're smelling it, the chances are that bad constituent that we find in there has dissipated to a level that's not harmful. Not that it doesn't smell, not that we shouldn't stop it, but what we really want, the EPA's goal is to determine, is there really a health issue? Because then that could trigger a whole different plan of action. But we haven't gotten to that point yet. It will probably take some time before we get those results. These will be continuous monitoring. They still try to figure out where to locate them. We have been doing some at the landfill. We've got, for the past 3 months, we've been doing at the landfill on kind of the southeast corner. And those have been relatively benign. There's some detects, but it's, again, relatively benign. I literally just got the results from the 3rd month that we'll be giving to EPA tomorrow. I'll stop at that, and if you have any questions, glad to answer them.
Any questions?
I do have one question. So you said that there are 19 gas wells currently at the landfill, and you said 5 to 7 of them aren't operating?
Yes.
So you then mentioned that you wanted to add more gas wells. How many more are we talking?
At least 10. There's a number of reasons why. There's certain economies of scale. When you bring a gas well rig in, there's an initial cost to set that up, which is a fixed number. So if you had one well in, it would be very expensive. If you did one well, it'd be expensive. Your cost per well or per foot drilling gets less expensive. So it's somewhat of economies of scale is why that number 10 is important. But it's also important because just replacing the 5 or 6 or 7 that we have to, and then adding 3 or 4 more is a minimum that we think we need. We may need more than that because what we're going to do is we're going to replace the ones in place that are bad. Because if you look at the floor of a landfill, you basically take about a 200-foot ring around every well. And you want to have kind of like a cell. So you want to have these cells touching each other so that there's enough wells to cover the migration, to pull the gas in through the waste. The wells go down about 150 to 200 feet. So we want to make sure that the current well field is working. And then we need to go into the south end of the landfill where this chimney is and kind of inch closer to it to determine really where it is and then how to vent it best. And so we'll get closer to that chimney, we'll start to pull air out of there. Again, it's going to be a combination of odors and methane and all of those things. At the same time, we're making sure that we get the leachate out of the landfill. Liquid is bad. Your landfill doesn't shed water, it captures water. So it's important to make sure that those pumps are working right, that we keep every drop of water we can out of it. And potentially even do some temporary covers in some places. We might put a temporary cover over a certain area that might be generating more reaction than others to try to quiet that reaction down. Again, the well part, though, will give us some of the data when we get deeper to look at the temperatures. When we drill a well, we monitor the temperatures that we find below surface. And that'll give us an indication of something is reacting down below.
I know you said that the benzene is high when it's in the sewer system, but it's mostly dissipated by the time it reaches the treatment plant, correct?
It's mostly diluted, yes. So what the challenge with the sewer system is you have a limit. It's 0.07 is the limit of benzene that's allowed, and that's part of your industrial waste permit that the landfill has with the sewer. And every business has an industrial waste permit with the sewer wastewater treatment plant. That limit is based on some EPA guidance of what's a safe limit for somebody to be inside of a manhole. Because when they go in a manhole, they have a gauge on them. And they have to clear the air and confined spaces you're all familiar with. Well, they're checking for methane, high levels of carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide. But they're not checking for benzene. So if benzene's present in the air and they weren't aware of it, it could be at a level, a concentrated level, that's dangerous. And they want to make sure that, again, it's somewhat of worker safety in the collection system, with people working in the collection system. It doesn't go into the homes because the homes are dropping with a trap, but it's part of the sewer system. So we're working with them to try to figure out at what limit can be acceptable, and then how would we remove the benzene before it got to the sewer system. And that is no small task, not an inexpensive task, but we are looking at every possible option, and then we'll present them to the landfill, Mr. Eads, and ultimately to council for decisions on a path forwards on those.
And benzene is found in gasoline, correct?
Yes.
What else? What are the other sources of benzene?
It's in most petroleum products. It's a byproduct of plastics. It's literally in a lot of things. It's a chemical that's very prevalent. If you go up to a pump and it says, warning, be careful of the air where you're pumping gas. Don't stay here for prolonged times. That's benzene. That's what you're smelling. Vehicles put off benzene. Cigarette smoking. If somebody was a 2-pack a day smoker and they didn't open the windows, like years ago people would smoke in their homes, that house is just packed with benzene. That benzene comes off of tobacco products. So it's everywhere. Where it's coming from is the mystery of the century, because the perimeter wells around the landfill that we check to make sure that nothing leaves the landfill and contaminates the water, they're all clean. We don't get benzene hits around the landfill. We're getting benzene hits deep under the landfill. So where is it coming from? We've got a number of hypotheses, but we don't really know. We may never know. Knowing could cost more than fixing it, and knowing might not change anything. Now, that's not to say we're not going to keep looking in reasonable ways. Bottom line is we have it there, and we have to figure out how, if we're going to give it to the sewer system, how do we treat it.
And I think what you said was important to go back and highlight that when you're around the perimeter of the landfill, it's not registering benzene going out into the periphery. It's all concentrated in one circle underneath the landfill.
So whenever you have a contaminant underground, it creates a plume. Kind of like an air plume, but it's a plume in the groundwater. Groundwater flows, but groundwater flows very, very slowly. It's not like a river. I mean, it flows at a foot or 2 feet a year, maybe, if you're at tops, maybe less than that. And we know where the groundwater flows under the landfill, but since the landfill's been pumping water from 300 foot down for 20 years, there's a cone essentially around this landfill where all this water, groundwater, is kind of concentrated down to this lower point. So that's what's protecting the monitoring wells from picking up anything, most likely, because it's all staying there. So the question is, how's it getting into the gradient, which is below the liner? Again, there's a liner which has leachate pipes in it. Then there's a layer that has witness lines in it. And there's another layer that has gradient and groundwater in it. We're getting it way down here. So it's not coming through the trash as far as we can see at this point. It's down here because we're not seeing the same high levels of concentration of benzene up here with leaching. That being said, there's some challenges with understanding the volumes of leachate gradient because the wet well needs the pumps repaired, the levels repaired. It's a lot of maintenance on that, so we can get a little bit better data. We know the total volume, but there's still some mixing occurring there somewhere. That's what we're trying to determine as well.
Thank you for explaining that to me. I appreciate it.
One question, you mentioned as you're drilling down, you're monitoring temperature to see if something's reacting. What exactly does that mean, if something is reacting, and what are the bad things that happen with that, and what can you do to fix that?
Well, decomposition is essentially a process where it's digesting waste, it's digesting material, and it creates an aerobic and anaerobic condition whereby it's essentially taking fuel, the methane, and the oxygen, and creating a reaction, kind of in the wastewater world that's referred to as bugs or that are eating the waste. And it's the natural process of decomposition, but it's getting accelerated because the conditions of fuel and oxygen and liquid have accelerated that. So much like a fire, you can't have a fire without oxygen and fuel. You can't have a reaction without oxygen, fuel, and methane, and the waste. When they all react together, like a big compost pile. What happens in a compost pile? Spontaneous combustion, it heats up, it's a reaction. It's not fire, but it gets hot. It's similar to that. And again, it's not a fire. We've not seen any indication of any flames, but we see that it's digesting this too quickly. And by doing that, it can actually break down the material below surface and create problems for that. We haven't seen any sinkholes or any drops. We don't know how deep it is. It may be very deep in the landfill. That's what we suspect. So that's why we're not seeing it at the surface. When we start to drill down, we'll watch the temperatures go up. 130 degrees below the ground on a well is normal. Anything over 130 degrees on the current gas wells becomes a problem. We have to make adjustments. The way they make adjustments is they cut the air off. Again, we cut the fuel off, or we either cut the fuel off or we cut the air off. So if we have a hot well, and that's pretty normal, we would make those adjustments. when we drill these new wells, we're gonna find those same things and have to make those adjustments.
You mentioned drilling wells. When you drill them down, I know you want to kind of stagger them out throughout the lateral area of the landfill. Do you also try to stagger them in depth, or does that really matter? I mean, then you go down as far as you can because you can collect all the way up.
A little bit of both. You do go down as far as you can. There's kind of a limit. It's hard. I mean, 150 is usually about as deep as you go. There are well drillers that'll get you to 200, but it's a difficult environment to drill through waste because you can get a lot of refusals. You'll get a well and you only get 25 feet and you'll hit something that you can't drill through. These are huge. These are drills. This drill bit is 3 foot around. It's big because we want this great big hole, big enough that when we pull the waste out of it, it doesn't collapse. So we can stick a pipe in it and fill it up with gravel, basically design this extraction system. So we will go as deep as we can if the waste is deep enough, and your waste in the area is certainly deep enough. So we are looking at trying to do 200-foot wells where it's appropriate.
Any other questions for us, sir?
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Want to answer questions from the
I
public?
could, or I'd be glad to talk with you afterwards, however, whatever the council, pleasure of the council.
Would you mind coming up to the microphone?
When you say that the levels were not dangerous to, that you felt like were affected any health issues, what health issues were you referring to?
So I'm not referring to any health issues specifically. It's just that the levels that we have seen out there haven't been high enough concentrations that we'll be receiving those levels. And again, we haven't done samples at your house, let's say. So I can't speak for what concentration could come to your home. That again, that's something that EPA may be able to help with having monitors in the neighborhood that would capture that air that you're smelling. Because it doesn't happen all the time. It kind of comes and goes, it comes in waves, and you have good days and you have terrible days. So while that being there long enough that we were able to capture some of the really bad days and say, okay, yeah, this day, yeah, this vinyl chloride was at 5 parts per billion. And so long as it's, I'm making this up, so long as it's under 10 parts, it's not a health hazard. But yeah, when it's beyond 10, those are the kind of determinations that they would make. That's not part of it.
Okay, I just ask that you keep in mind that when you say that it's kind of hard for us residents to hear because we are experiencing things we consider health hazards, like burning eyes and nausea. I mean, walking from my house to my car earlier in the week, I almost threw up, and I realized maybe I have a beer gag reflex, I don't know, but that's a health hazard. So don't really take that lightly when you start saying that, because it's affecting us all in different ways. So just keep that in mind. And then the question I have for the mayor and Mr. Eads, I appreciate all of this work, but you've got to understand what we hear as residents is that we have to keep going and smelling this, and it's going to take more time that we're going to be living with this. We've gotten into a place where we can't sell our property because a lot of people know about the odor, and we can't sell our property and then go buy something somewhere else because of the way the property is selling now. So we're trapped. We feel trapped. So what I want to ask you guys is, at what point is it costing us more to try to fix this than it is to just shut it down and do something else? Has that even been part of your discussion?
And first, let me say, I completely understand the predicament.
I know you do. I know you do.
Just the other night, I think it was last night actually, I noticed some complaints on Facebook about 10 o'clock, and I went out and drove up and down Georgia and Taylor Street last night. So, my heart goes out to all of you living in that area because I've been over there, I've smelt the odors when you've complained, and I'll be honest here too. people have complained and I've gone over and not smelled the odor. So, and I think a lot of that just depends on, by the time I get there, maybe they've dissipated.
It comes and goes.
Shutting down the landfill has been a topic of discussion internally. Shutting down that landfill is a significant financial undertaking.
Realize that.
I mean, significant. It probably financially is not feasible for the city to shut down that landfill today. The best way for the city to shut down that landfill is to, and this is something people are not going to want to hear, but it's to fill that landfill up quicker and cap it as quickly as possible so that everything is trapped underneath the cap. That's the best way to shut down that landfill. Does that mean that that's what's going to happen? We don't know yet. We are evaluating every possibility to come up with a solution so that we can fix this problem sooner rather than later. And I think Mr. Hoch spoke to it earlier. It's basically a forensic examination of that landfill. We thought we had the solution fixed. We're beginning to fix it back in January. As we start looking at things and start monitoring other things, we realize there's other things that have to be done. And it's going to be a process. I've said it before, I wish there was a light switch I could go over there and flip it off and no one would have to deal with it, including me. You know, it's not fun to have to sit and answer questions from citizens that's impacting their lives. It's something that's on my shoulders, it's my responsibility, and I'll do that anytime that I can, because ultimately the buck stops with me. So,
and we realize, I mean, and don't take anything personally, but, you know, we've elected you guys, and you are who we have. You know, we have to come to you guys. And I try to do it in the most respectful way possible, but sometimes my emotions get the best of me because no more entertaining at my house this summer. You know, afraid to invite people over, and I know I've said all this before, but Mr. Hoch even said this is an expensive process. So how expensive is it going to have to get before we realize this is not working? So I'm not asking you to answer that question right now, obviously, because I know you don't have the answer to that, but just know that those things are in the back of our minds. And a lot of us residents are doing as much research as you are. And we did not hear from the EPA today. They were supposed to come out today. We didn't hear from them.
well, the EPA is on site, and I will just go ahead and tell everyone. You're probably not going to hear from the EPA for several reasons. One, they want to put canisters in locations that are going to be secure, simply because those canisters are extremely expensive.
They were supposed to put one in my yard today. They asked permission to,
Okay.
and they have not.
And they may be there tomorrow, you know, I don't know, but from the conversations I've had with the EPA, they really do not want those locations disclosed, simply because, one, they don't want anybody to mess with it, and then two, they don't want someone to put something next to the canister that would potentially skew the results of what they're trying to get the answers for.
All right, well, I appreciate your time, and
Would you just, while you're there at the microphone,
okay.
state your name and record, Ms. Mother, just so it go.
Okay, I'm Shannon Mutter, and I live in Bristol, Virginia, in Metacris subdivision on Milburn Drive.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments. You know, unless anybody has any questions, I'll just say, you know, I appreciate the updates, and we need to do this as expeditiously as we can, because I know that this is causing a whole lot of not just inconvenience, but it's really, you know, it's been going on for a while, but it's a very complex problem as well. So we're trying to get to it, and as soon as there's something that you can recommend that council can take action, I won't speak for the body, but I'll just say, you know, I'm more than willing to do it as quickly as we can and move this forward as quickly as we can. One thing before we get off this topic, mention for the audience, everybody, about how you're going to meet with the public.
Before the next council meeting, June 22nd, I'll meet with members of the public at 5:30 in my conference room and just kind of give a quick update as to where we've gone over the past 2 weeks and try to answer any questions that I have the answers to. And if I don't have the answers, I'll reach out to Mr. Hoch and get the answers for you all and get that back to you as soon as I get the answers. We're going to attempt to do that before every meeting over the next several months. It may not be possible for me to do that at every meeting just due to schedules, but I want to make a commitment that I'm going to do it at least once a month before council meetings as we move forward throughout this process.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you again, Mr.
Thank you.
All right. Item number 5, consideration of a resolution authorizing the mayor of Bristol to renew the joint cooperation agreement with the Northeast Tennessee Virginia Home Consortium for an additional 3-year qualification period. Staff report, Ms. Dalton.
Good evening. So in 2003, the city of Bristol, Tennessee, and other units of local government, which include Bristol, Tennessee, Bristol, Virginia, Kingsport, Bluff City, Johnson City, Sullivan County, and Washington County, Tennessee, formed the Northeast Tennessee Virginia Home Consortium, enabling the city of Bristol, Tennessee to receive and administer home funds as lead entity on behalf of the consortium. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development requires such consortia to be formally redesignated every 3 years. And this is the 3rd year, and staff is requesting that council approve the resolution authorizing Mayor Hartley to renew the joint cooperation agreement with the Northeast Tennessee Virginia Home Consortium.
Thank you, Ms. Dalton. We didn't have anybody signed up, but is there any public comment? Hearing none, the reading of the resolution.
Resolution authorizing the mayor of Bristol, Virginia to renew the joint cooperation agreement with the Northeast Tennessee Virginia Home Consortium for an additional 3-year qualification period. Whereas the city of Bristol, Virginia has determined that the health and welfare of its citizens and the economic vitality of the area will benefit from increasing the availability of decent, safe, affordable housing. And whereas a cooperative regional approach to providing housing avoids duplication of effort and promotes more effective delivery of services. And whereas a consortium of area local governments is entitled to receive funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development under the Home Investment Partnerships Act, that they would be unqualified to receive individually. And whereas in 2003, the city of Bristol, Tennessee, and other units of local governments formed the Northeast Tennessee Virginia Home Consortium, enabling the city of Bristol, Tennessee to receive and administer home funds as lead entity on behalf of the consortium. And whereas the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development requires such consortia to be formally redesignated every 3 years. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Bristol, Virginia, that 1, the City Council hereby supports the continuation of the Northeast Tennessee Virginia Home Consortium and authorizes the mayor to execute agreements with other participating units of general purpose local government to continue this consortium. The mayor is further authorized to sign all contracts approved by the city attorney with other governmental agencies as may be required to carry out activities of the cooperation agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Eads. What is the pleasure of council?
Move to approve the resolution as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, call roll.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnham,
Yes.
Hartley,
Yes.
Thank you.
Item number 6, approval of financing of one unused CAT 326 excavator with a purchase price of $243,620. One new unused CAT 72504A Articulated Truck DCA1 with a purchase price of $352,947. One new unused 2021 International MV607 SBA 20-yard U-Way Cobra rear loading trash truck with a purchase price of $170,500. Stafford. McCullough.
I'm gonna start with the AIS information here and then defer to Mr. McCullough for the equipment description if needed. This process began with requisitions submitted for each piece of equipment. Purchases are to be made through Sourcewell contracts as competitively negotiated by Sourcewell. As of the release of the RFP, delivery based on vendors' inventory was expected by June 30th, 2021 for all equipment. The CAT 326 excavator will be used when the current excavator with over 10,000 machine hours is down and assist in the bottom of the landfill. The CAT 725 truck will be an additional piece of equipment which can be used in rougher conditions than a tandem dump truck can be used in. The 2021 International trash truck will replace a 2012 International with over 14,400 hours, which will then be used as a backup. The request for proposals was placed on the city's website and EVA, Virginia's electronic procurement site, on May 6, 2021, and closed on May 20th of 2021 at 2 p.m. 8 responses were received and evaluated based on the RFP's stated criteria, which were as follows: demonstration of business's historic stability as a financing entity, submission of various payment period scenarios and schedules as requested, financing costs in total, the ability to accept the City of Bristol, Virginia's preferred form of payment, ease of communication with and availability of the financing entity's representative. Based on the evaluation of each proposal, United Financial, a division of Home Trust Bank, was selected as proposing the most beneficial financing for the city. United Financial, a division of Home Trust, offered a bank-qualified fixed interest rate of 1.39% for a term of 60 months. This proposal equates to 10 semi-annual payments of $81,116.39. And I do want to add that these lease payments are in the fiscal year 22 budget that Council approved at the May 25th, 2021 meeting. I'd also like to state that Vicki Warren, our procurement specialist, and fleet maintenance manager David McConnell did a lot of work in getting this out for RFP and to where we are tonight. So I just wanted to thank them for the work they've done on that.
And I'll just go over some of the issues or concerns that the reasons why we need this equipment. In regards to the articulating dump, in the past we used a tandem dump truck, which is basically intended for streets and or construction sites where they've got roads into them. A uke, in this case, or the articulating dump, is intended for, I guess, more rough construction sites, or as in our case, a landfill where you're having to drive across the trash. And so the tandem dumps, we lost it about 3 years ago. It just reached its end of life, and it wasn't really working that well for us. Whenever we have the least amount of rain, the roads are slick, and it wouldn't even work. I mean, when I say the roads, I'm sorry, the path across the clay to where we collect the clay material, we mine it, the borrow area. So it's just difficult to get in and out of that. It carries more, it works better in wet weather. We intend to use it both for cover material and for mining of the older landfill, which we've discussed before. We've been using, like I say, a roll-off, which is using a roll-off truck, which has an open-ended container, which it's really not intended for that, but that's been serving the purpose. Again, the U can go into difficult to reach areas that a tandem can never get to. And I know this is maybe not a great reason, but we're the only landfill in this area that does not have a U. It's a common piece of equipment for a landfill to use, and it really will make a big difference in being able to get the cover delivered to the areas that need it in a decent amount of time instead of stretching it out. So that's for the articulating dump. The excavator, We've got an existing excavator that's 10 years old, has overheating problems, it's reached the end of its life. We'll probably keep it as a backup, but we need a replacement. We need a replacement that we can rely on, that's not breaking down, it's not falling apart on us. The rear loader, again, she mentioned it's got over 14,000 hours. The typical life of a trash truck is about 10,000 hours. So we've way exceeded that life. It's just a ticking time bomb right now. It needs to get replaced. So I'll be glad to answer any questions that y'all might have.
In presentation of AIS, I forgot to add staff recommendation. Staff recommends that council approve the above listed equipment, the financing of that through United Financial Division of Contracts.
Mr. Wingard, I know you had mentioned to me earlier today about continuing to use a tandem to basically have a stockpile of clay near the landfill floor. I did speak with Mr. Hoch about that earlier today, the possibility of doing that, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but really the landfill's not in a position right now to be able to do that based on the amount of cover that we need in that landfill. It's something that can potentially be done in the future, but based on the conversation we had today, I think it will be several years down the road before we can get to a position where we can pyramid the clay like you suggested.
I didn't suggest a pyramid unless.
Well, I mean, I took it as to stockpile it and then be able to pull from it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But to me, it just makes sense that your cover, you got crews to concentrate on daily cover, to where when there is inclement weather, you're not running all over a landfill in tandem trucks trying to get to it with sloppy wet. So it only makes sense to have your cover close by. But anyway, that was not my only issue with it. I mean, I could not support this because, in my opinion, it's more debt. This lease, even though it's a great, would you say 1.9% interest, 1.39, that's almost unheard of. But still, the fact remains, it is going to be new debt, and I cannot support any debt in the city. We have worked our finances out to where we can start paying cash for stuff, and we need to start thinking like that. So, but yeah, I believe we need to be stockpiling the daily cover and have it in the landfill ready to go that evening.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. McCullough? The equipment that this is replacing, is there some of that we'll still have, we'll keep?
Yeah,
that could be used, for example, if something was down or?
Yes, the rear loader will keep the old one, and we can use it when we have to make up for holidays, or like if there's an event downtown, we can use both of them at that time. The excavator, yes, we're keeping the old one on that. Again, because you might have it over in the mining area, and then you might need something down in the bottom to do some work. And so while the other one is kind of at the end of life, it's still usable, and we can keep it running, but it will be helpful to have said yes.
Any more questions? I would ask Ms. Bradlin, you said this was included in the budget, and this amount, is it?
Yes, the total lease payments are included in fiscal year 22 budget.
Okay.
Yes.
At this point, we have public comments. Again, no one signed up, but I think Mr. Pollard would like to make a comment.
Thank you. My name is Michael Pollard, 140 Ashley Drive. You talked about the competitive rates, and that's a tremendous rate. But I was wondering if there was a similar negotiation process on the equipment prices. You were talking about the rates, but I was wondering if we got the best possible price on the equipment itself.
We did look at other equipment. One of the biggest issues for us is local service too, and the CAT dealer offered very good competitive price, and in service he's the closest of any of us, and we've always had good service.
All right, what's the pleasure of council?
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Osborne, second by Vice Mayor Farnum. Any council discussion?
You know, I will say, this is an excellent rate. I think it is a testament to how we have handled the city's finances over the past 3 or 4 years. You know, that we're able to do a financing plan for 1.39%. So thank you, CFO, for your work on that. And you know, it's a good finance rate. It's budgeted for, and we need the equipment. So I think it's a no-brainer.
Again, I appreciate it. This is a good finance rate, and with some of this equipment, you was doing the numbers, and yeah, it's not that much more than the cost to finance it right now with some of the other challenges that are coming up at the landfill that we talked about. I think preserving that cash to deal with those would be much more prudent than trying to pay for this all at once. So, any other comments? All right, hearing none, clerk, call the roll.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
No.
Farnum,
Yes.
Hartley,
Yes. Item number 7, approval of lease of a CAT 826K landfill compactor. Staff report.
Mayor and members of council, this agenda item is approval of the lease for the CAT 826 landfill compactor. This process began with the requisitions submitted for the compactor. Contract price is based on Sourcewell Contract 032119-CAT, competitively negotiated by Sourcewell, with lease financing provided by Caterpillar Financial Services Corporation. Experience with landfill compactors has shown that at 10,000 machine hours, the machine's functionality is compromised as repairs and associated costs greatly increase while decreasing the hours available for the machine to be in use. Thus, it has been the city's practice to lease this machine for 48 months, which equates to approximately 10,000 machine hours, then surrender the machine back to the lessor and enter into another lease. The CAT 826K compactor will be placed in service when the current compactor lease expires in December 2021, at which time it will have approximately 10,000 machine hours. Under the current lease, if the compactor is used over 10,000 machine hours, any repairs are the responsibility of the city and fees are applied for machine hours over 10,000. The request for proposals was placed on the city's website and EVA, Virginia's electronic procurement site, on May 6, 2021 and closed on May 20th, 2021 at 2 p.m. One response was received from Carter Machinery and Company, Inc. Under this proposal, the CAT 826K will be covered by the standard warranty of 12 months, unlimited hours, the extended warranty of 48 months, 10,000 hours, and the premier warranty of travel time and mileage included. As referenced previously, compactors have a high functioning life of 10,000 hours, and this warranty would effectively cover that time frame. The 4-year lease will be provided through Caterpillar Financial Services Corporation with 48 monthly payments of $14,358.11 for a total of $689,189.28. At lease's end, a payment of $202,965 would purchase the CAT 826K should the city desire to do so, which typically the city does not. It turns it back at that time. This proposal was evaluated based on the RFP's stated criteria, which were as follows. 1, proposed CAT 826K or comparable to meet the city's expectations of use to include applicable warranty. 2, demonstration of business's historic overall stability and interactions with the city. And 3, detail and total of leasing costs. 4, the ability to accept the City of Bristol, Virginia's preferred form of payment. 5, ease of communication with and availability of leasing entities, representative and product support. After the evaluation was completed, Partner Machinery was deemed to have proposed the appropriate compactor to meet the city's needs with the lease provided through Caterpillar Financial Services Corporation. And staff does recommend that council approve the leasing of the CAT 826K to be done through Caterpillar Financial Services Corporation as proposed by Partner Machinery. Mr. McCullough, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to just add, most people don't understand, and I didn't realize this either, that a landfill is actually more abrasive on equipment than a rock quarry is. And I guess, most of us just think, well, it's just paper. Well, it's not paper, it's metal, 2x4s, and everything else like that. One of the things that David McConnell, the fleet manager, was telling me is that on the undercarriage, the bolts that they have to get in there and work on that undercarriage from time to time, those bolts are worn so thin that they can't get a socket on there. They actually have to cut the bolts off and replace them, just because of the abrasion from the landfill, from the work in the landfill. And so it's a difficult environment for this equipment. And I guess that's the other reason, it's that 10,000 hours in there, once it's reached its end of life, or that 10,000 hours, it's really close without doing some major rework to it to make it feasible to continue using it. It's just not economically feasible to continue with that piece of equipment because the repairs, downtime that we have to deal with are just more than what we would want to deal with, or that makes sense for us. And I'll be glad to answer any other questions you might have.
I'm going to add again that on this item, our procurement specialist, Vicki Warren, and the fleet maintenance manager, David McConnell, spent a lot of hours and a lot of time compiling this information, checking and double checking. So I just want to make note of that and thank them for their hard work on this.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley, Mr. McCullough, and I appreciate them checking and double checking that for us. Are there any questions first? Staff? Mr. Pollard, you want to make a comment?
You mentioned that the new equipment will be under a 4-year lease, and the old equipment was also under a 4-year lease, but the old equipment is now approaching its end of life. How much overlap is there between the two leases?
One will start the other, the other will start.
Okay, so it's actually just rotating leases between the two. Okay, I was just afraid of duplicating expenses. Okay, thank you.
And again, Ms. Bradley, I think you said this, but this expense, it was in the fiscal year 22 budget.
Yes.
All right, what's the pleasure of council?
I move to approve the lease as presented.
Second.
We have a motion, Councilman Osborne, second Vice Mayor Farnham. Any discussion?
Well, I'm going to say that if we're replacing a machine that's 4 years old with 10,000 hours on it, and going straight out of one lease straight into another lease, I think that's a problem. We should be able to use equipment a year or 2 or 3 after the lease expires. Now, I fully understand the comment that Mr. McCullough made about the bolts underneath it being more so thin. I spent 10 years in the marine industry, and you would never, ever think that fishing line can cut a stainless prop shaft, but I promise you it can. There is some crazy things that happen. And the underbelly of this equipment out there running around in that landfill, it is not dirt. It is constantly being hit, scraped on a daily basis. And it is going to wear stuff out. But still the fact remains that it is our job to maintain that equipment and do regular inspections. And when we see that the underbelly is going thin, it's time to pull some bolts and throw some new bolts in there to where when it comes time to service it, we're not cutting bolts. Them bolts are not that expensive. If you're seeing that you're going through bolts every 8 months, then those bolts should be replaced every 8 months to where it's feasible to service that machine without breaking out the torches or the impacts to just go ahead and snap them off. So I see, because I have a mechanical background, that we're not maintaining properly what we are using on a daily basis. And we have talked about this in the past. We've got to start doing better maintenance, more routine maintenance. This equipment has to be greased every morning before it is started and a check done. And if we are in a position where we are going straight out of one lease into another lease with a 4-year-old machine, there's an issue. Because I promise you, as soon as this lease is up on this machine, it's going to be taken back by CAT. They're going to refurbish it. They're going to sell it again, and some other company is going to use it to make good money. We got to start operating this city as if we are business owners and get all the life we can and the biggest bang for our buck out of all this equipment. We have to. 10,000 hours. That is getting up there, but that is not the life of this equipment. It may be the recommended hours for it to be replaced. But if we do our job right on our end, we can go over that 10,000 hours by a considerable bit in my mind and still have functioning equipment that will do the job. Now, do you need backups? Yes, you do. This stuff is big equipment. You don't just pick up the phone and have a piece delivered to you in the morning. That don't happen. So everything has to be scheduled and planned out, and I'm glad to hear you're keeping the excavator as a backup, so we need to get the overheating taken care of. But if we're going from one lease to another lease, to me, that is a rich man's world, working class, middle class. You lease your vehicles, then you buy that lease out, whatever, at the end of it, and it's yours for a while longer, and you get more life out of it. You've done spent the money. We've got to change the business plan on this landfill in this city because we can't sustain this. Right now, this is fixing to pass. There ain't a doubt in my mind it's fixing to pass, and this council is going to put this city back in debt over $1.5 million tonight.
You know, I would point out that we have a whole lot of expenses in the city, as you know, and leasing might not be ideal, but it is prudent in this situation. If we had not leased the other equipment that we just leased, and if we didn't lease this and we just bought it outright, you would have just spent $1.5 million on all this equipment. And that's a significant amount of money to spend all at once. So ideally you do want to be able to buy the stuff, but it is more prudent in these situations, the financial situations we have to lease it, in my mind. I do agree with you completely that, we do need to step up the maintenance because, if the life is 10,000 hours, I'd like to be able to get 15 out of it, or something. But I agree with you on that. But we don't want a situation, especially with this being a trash compactor, where the old one goes down and we just don't have access to it.
Mr. McCullough, I'd like for you to address the maintenance that we do out there. I think it's important they understand the maintenance that we do on this equipment, because when they say they're not maintaining the equipment, that's a shot at the employees that work basically 7 days a week for the city that maintain this equipment for us. I have the utmost faith in David McConnell and his recommendations as it pertains to the equipment and what they do to maintain it. So if you can maybe go into a little detail about the maintenance of each of these pieces of equipment, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, they do regular maintenance every day on all the equipment. They're making sure it's greased, they're making sure it's maintained. One of the things you have to think about on the compactor, for instance, trash is getting up in around those tracks. And so that undercarriage, when it goes back to them, they're going to replace the undercarriage because it's just been abused for 4 years just because of the nature of the environment. The engine on there, it might go for another 6 months or a year or even longer, but it may not. So then you're down for a month or so. I don't know how long it takes to repair one of the engines, to replace all that stuff, and so then you're back to finding a piece of equipment to do that. But in terms of the other thing I wanted to mention, talk about in terms of trying to keep equipment running. I'll give you for instance on the trash trucks. It has the trash goes in there and has a compactor. It scrapes the bottom of that thing like 3 times for every pickup. And so that bottom gets worn thin. They have to pull that metal out, replace the bottom, and they do that several times. It's not just one time. They do it continuously to keep that equipment running. We're not just turning something in because it's got a little bit of wear and tear. We're turning it in because we don't want the excessive maintenance that comes with something that there comes a point to where you can only do so much to a piece of equipment. And a lot of the trash trucks, I know we're talking about the excavator, but the trash trucks, they go in there and they replace those floors 3 or 4 times. And so we're keeping that equipment running much longer than most people would even consider. And that's why I have the utmost respect for David McConnell, because he keeps all this equipment running. Stuff that should have been gotten rid of years ago, but he's keeping it running, makes it work so that we can keep going with it. And I have to trust his recommendation is not on the excavator, on the compactor, is not frivolous. He's thinking about what's going to be coming down the pipe for his guys to have to do. And most of the work on that excavator is something that our guys are really not qualified to do on that. It's the engine size, the tracks and stuff that they have to replace, that's out of their area of expertise. They can do certain pieces of the maintenance, but the replacement and stuff, that's for other people. And so he knows the system well enough to know that what's coming down the pipe, what he's looking at long term, if we don't replace this excavator now or the compactor now, as opposed to trying to get another year out of it, it's going to create more headaches and more costs long term. He knows about trying to keep the costs under control, like I say, because we've kept equipment running that should have been gotten rid of years ago, and we keep a lot of that going. You see how old some of that stuff is, and I'll be glad to show you some of the things that they've done to keep this equipment going. Again, his recommendation is he feels like it's in our best interest to start new, because we talked about that. Because that's what you're asking is a valid question.
Well, I would also say, I mean, this city has historically not done a very good job of maintaining a fleet rotation so that you can purchase equipment, use it for the expected lifespan, and then have budgeted to purchase new equipment. So when he's making recommendations based on past historical knowledge that he sees that happens with this equipment, because we've got equipment that, we've got this trash truck's 9 years old, getting ready to be 10. So, this is not something that he is just making a recommendation just because the lease has expired. If he was not on vacation tonight, I would pick up the phone right now, I could call him and I could say, David, give me the history of PW 26. And off the top of his head, he can tell you the history of that truck and all of the equipment issues he's had with it. And he's amazing when it comes to his knowledge of our city vehicles.
Absolutely.
And it's almost like a photographic memory when it comes to what each vehicle did. And I'm talking every vehicle.
Yes.
I'm not talking just landfill vehicles, I'm talking lease vehicles, I'm talking normal city fleet vehicles, landfill vehicles, trash trucks. You could call him right now and say, I want the history of that truck, and he could rattle it off to you right now, without looking at a computer.
He knows the business. He knows it well. He knows in terms of maintenance what he's expecting, what he's looking for in the future. He knows it's in the city's best interest to replace that thing.
Any more comments? I will just say one thing, we've spent probably half an hour or more talking about leasing items that really this discussion belongs more during our budget workshops, because these things are budgeted for. If we're going to talk about whether we should lease or buy something, that's the time to have those discussions, not when they actually bring the lease up. I mean, we should, and I don't disagree that there's some things we should think about buying, and as the city manager pointed out, we need to, and we have been making improvements to get more towards a rotational system, but there's some things that it just makes more sense to lease, given the nature of how that equipment's used and the cost to it. So in my mind, those are more discussions that should be part of the budget process than just the actual approving of the item. That's just me.
And don't ask for discussion.
All right. Clerk, call roll.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
No.
Farnham,
Yes.
Hartley,
Yes. All right. Item number 8, consider taking formal action to commit certain funds to the debt service reserve.
Mayor and members of council, this item is, as the mayor stated, to consider taking formal action to commit certain funds to the debt service reserve. The background for this item, the fiscal year 21 general fund budget currently has $1 million budgeted to line item 4001 94035 9141 debt service budget reserve. Formal action by city council is required to commit these funds and identify them separately from the city's unassigned fund balance at year end, June 30th, 2021. Future formal action will be required by council to release these funds from committed status. This action is consistent with the city's fund balance policy, which allows for identification of debt service reserves sufficient to meet the needs of the city's annual future general obligation bond debt service per the schedule that is presented quarterly to the Finance Committee and to City Council. Previous relevant action on June 12th, 2019, the City Council first committed funds to a debt service reserve of $1.6 million. On June 9th, 2020, City Council released $653,823 of these funds to be used for fiscal year 21 debt payments per the debt service payment schedule. And on June 23rd, 2020, City Council voted to commit $1 million to this debt service reserve account. Currently, the balance is approximately $2 million in the debt service reserve account, and allows for funding of the debt service into fiscal year 26 per the schedule that is presented quarterly to council. This would enable the debt service schedule to be funded into fiscal year 27, as has been mentioned every time it's been presented, or the last couple times it's been presented to City Council. Staff recommends that council commit $1 million of fiscal year 21 budgeted funds to the debt service reserve account and commit interest earnings on the debt service reserve account. And I would just add that this is the last year, fiscal year 21 is the last year that in the general fund, there was $1 million budgeted there. Going forward, starting with fiscal year 22, that $1 million per year is used to pay the city's escalating debt.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Any questions?
Yeah, I got a question. All right. Did I hear you correct when you said that this $1 million will carry us and put us ahead of our debt commitment to the year 2027?
What I said, Councilman Wingard, is we have a debt service plan
Yes.
that's presented quarterly that shows council and the citizens how the city is going to deal with the escalating debt service. Yes.
And you have put a beautiful path plan in place.
It's a work in progress from lots of different input sources. And so right now, with the money that we currently have in the debt service reserve, that gets the city into, per the plan, into fiscal year 26, allowing for the escalation. This $1 million would get the city into fiscal year 27, which will be here before we know it.
So that puts us way ahead. That's beautiful. I love that. I know what staff recommendation is, but I'm going to ask the council to consider this. I think this city would be wiser right now, given the fact that we have a good buffer towards our debt, because the city has laid out a beautiful plan. We're going to survive our debt. We feel all confident about that, which was on the verge of sinking us just a few years back. But right now, our critical crisis is this landfill. $1.5 million was spent tonight in new monies. We know that there is other stuff that we have to do in this landfill that's coming. Tonight, it was presented to us a proposal of up to 10, maybe more wells. We have issues in the community. I want to make a proposal, instead of putting that whole $1 million aside for debt, that we put $500,000 aside for debt and take the other $500,000 and put it in a fund to where the city would have it on the landfill, because that landfill has some serious problems, and we have to address them. If we spend all our money, where are we going to go when the crisis hits? We need this, we need that. We have an opportunity tonight to set $500,000 aside, knowing we have issues. And I'm making a recommendation that this council do so.
I guess I was just going to say, I know we do have those needs at the landfill, but I guess I'm just not sure. I know we voted and spent, I think it was over $100,000, maybe it was January, February, to do some work there. I guess what I'm saying is, I guess we don't really know how much it's going to cost, or what else is needed at the landfill. I know they're working down there every day, but so while I like the idea of putting money aside in that, I guess, I don't know, I kind of don't know if it's the right time, I feel like, because we don't really know how much it'll be.
You know, and I would say, you know, in addition to the unassigned fund balance, you know, we have, you know, other fund balances where there's money sitting for unforeseen expenses, emergency circumstances. So I don't know that it would be ideal to deviate from, you know, as you said, it is an excellent plan, you know, that gets us into FY 2027. So I don't know that it would be maybe fiscally prudent to deviate from that. You know, when we've got this $1 million that we need to put in the unassigned fund balance to carry us into FY 2027. So, like I say, there are other funds that are available, you know, if there is a large unexpected cost that we need to address.
I would agree. I mean, the plan, and I think we're all in agreement, it's a good plan, and we've worked it well. And one of the things that Ms. Bradlin mentioned, I was going to ask about, but she already mentioned it, is this is the last year that we have this amount of money available to set aside into a reserve. Next year, it's already accounted for as part of the ongoing debt payments. So this is really one of our last chances to build that reserve up, which will get us into 2027, which, you know, again, gets us close. There's still work to be done in that plan. We've not completely got over the hump yet, so we need to be mindful of that. And as the Vice Mayor said, we don't know exactly all the costs that might be associated with the work at the landfill, but as Councilman Osborne stated, I do believe there are ways through various funds that as we know those costs, we can deal with them. Again, this is one reason why it's important to not just make sure we get this debt part so we don't have to worry about it, but have that emergency reserve, whatever, I forget what we call it now, but have a reserve fund that is general, so it can be used for whatever comes up, not specified for one thing or another. And that's kind of been where we're at. That was our policies. We're still not where we said we want to be on any of those yet, and I think we need to kind of stay the course if we can. Any comments from the public? What's the pleasure of council? Wait a minute, Mr. Pollard did.
Since you gave the opportunity for public comment on this, I'll just mention briefly that Ms. Bradley mentioned that if this is set towards the debt reserve, and if there is an issue at the landfill which requires specific expenses, we know that there's an issue at the landfill. I'm not debating that. I'm saying that if we have later on a specific cost that needs, the council can vote at a later point to recall the funds that are dedicated for the landfill. It'll take a majority vote because something like that is not something that should be taken lightly. But the council does have the option to pull this back from the debt reserve to use them for something else that is emergent, such as something in the landfill. Something that is done can be reversed, but if it does need to be reversed, it's not to be taken lightly, and it will take a majority vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pollard. What's the pleasure of council?
I make a motion that we commit $1 million of the fiscal year 2021 budgeted funds to the debt service reserve account and commit the interest earnings on the debt service reserve account.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Clerk, call roll.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
No.
Farnum,
Yes.
Hartley,
Yes. All right, item number 9, supplemental appropriation of $460,386. Mr. Bradley?
Once again, thank you, Mayor, members of council. As the Mayor mentioned, this is a supplemental appropriation of $460,386. I sent Mr. Christian the wrong slide, and I don't have access to my information, so normally you all would have a clear PowerPoint slide, so hopefully this is clear as to what this appropriation is comprised of. This is to appropriate the additional revenue received for DRI Phase 1. This revenue is collected in the general fund and transferred to the IDA to service the IDA bonds. The city is obligated to do that per the bond documents. And this is just a budget transfer because the good news is our revenue was higher than anticipated as we developed the fiscal year 21 budget. So this would include revenue items, the real property on the DRI of $24,000, personal property on the DRI of $70,000, local sales and use tax DRI of $99,000, restaurant meal taxes for the DRI of $70,000, business license taxes to the DRI of $29,506, state sales tax for the DRI of $167,880, and the expenditure side is the transfer to the IDA for the DRI of $460,386. Once again, these are based on estimates of the best data that we had available as we prepared this information. It's just budget. This is just a budget amendment so that that funding to the DRI through the IDA is more accurate. And this is required to be, the transfer has to be made for the bond document, and this appropriation does require, Mr. Reese, correct me if I'm wrong, 4 affirmative votes. So staff recommends that the supplemental appropriation be approved as listed.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Ms. Brown? Any public comments? Again, no one had signed up. Hearing none. Have a motion?
Move to approve the supplemental appropriation as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Clerk, call roll.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnum,
Yes.
Hartley,
Yes. All right, the last item is the consent agenda, and what is the pleasure of council?
Move for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion by Councilman Osborne, a second by Vice Mayor Farnum. Clerk, call roll.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnum,
Yes.
Hartley,
Yes. No further business, we stand adjourned.